In the dark halls of medieval Europe, queens sat behind walls of gold, surrounded by jewels and guarded by power. Yet they were prisoners of their own thrones. Their crowns gleamed, but their choices were caged by politics, arranged marriages, and the wills of men who ruled in their names. Far from these courts, beyond the frozen seas and storm-torn fjords, another kind of woman lived, not royal, not crowned, but free in ways those queens could never imagine. In the wild north, where life bowed to no king, Viking women forged their own kind of rule. They commanded homes, owned land, led trade, and even shaped the destiny of their people. They weren't queens, yet they ruled their world in ways history tried to forget. We often speak of Viking warriors and kings, of conquests and raids. But behind every ship that sailed and every empire that rose stood women whose power built the foundation of survival. Their strength wasn't written in sagas for glory. It was woven into every thread of daily life. Without them, there would have been no farms, no trade, no ships, no home to return to. If their story fades, we lose half the truth of what made the Viking world endure. Without their leadership, the great Norse civilization, the one that reshaped Europe, might have never survived its own storms. The North was unforgiving. Every winter tested who deserved to live. Snow fell for months, winds howled across the empty fields, and the sea turned into a wall of ice. In this world, survival was not a choice, it was a duty. Every hand had to work, every life had to matter. That is why Viking women were never ornaments, never background figures waiting for men to return. They were the backbone of every farm, every hall, and every ship that carried their people across the sea. While men fought wars or sailed into the unknown, it was the women who kept the world standing. They managed the farms, cared for the animals, stored food, and protected the family's honor. In the silence of long winters, they were the warmth that held life together. Viking society was built on balance, not on luxury. Every home, whether small or grand, was a place of hard work and shared struggle. When storms destroyed crops, women took charge of rebuilding. When hunger threatened, it was their wisdom that stretched supplies and kept families alive. They did not wait to be rescued. They were the reason there was something left to rescue. In the flickering light of the hearth, they made clothes, repaired tools, and planned the next season's planting. Their labor wasn't just survival, it was civilization itself, and in that frozen land, respect wasn't given by title, it was earned by strength. Viking men knew that without the women at home, their raids meant nothing. A man could win gold abroad, but if his home failed, he lost his honor. That is why the Viking woman stood as his equal, not by decree, but by necessity. In a world that showed no mercy, she had to be strong, wise, and unyielding. The harshness of the North did not break her. It forged her into the silent power behind the Viking age, the keeper of life in a land of death. When a Viking woman wore a ring of keys at her belt, it wasn't decoration, it was a crown. Those keys were more than metal. They were symbols of power, trust, and responsibility. Each key opened storerooms filled with food, chests holding silver, and rooms that kept the family's wealth safe. In a world ruled by axes and swords, her authority ruled the home, and in Viking life, the home was everything. The woman who carried the keys was called the husfru, the lady of the house, and her word held weight. She decided how resources were used, how workers were managed, and how the household prepared for the long, brutal winters. When her husband was away on raids or trade journeys, she became the leader, the decision-maker, and the protector of the family's honor. Inside the longhouse, the husfru was more than a caretaker. She was a commander of order. The hearth fire burned under her supervision, and the supplies lasted through her careful planning. When travelers or traders arrived, it was often she who welcomed them, offered mead, and managed the rituals of hospitality. In Viking culture, generosity and honor were sacred, and the woman of the house carried both in her hands. Her presence reflected strength, her calm spoke of discipline, and her wisdom held the family together when chaos ruled outside. The keys at her belt clinked softly when she moved, a sound that reminded everyone who truly guarded the heart of the household. Archaeologists have found these keys buried beside Viking women in their graves, proof of how deeply this symbol of power was respected. It was not wealth that defined her, but control, the ability to keep a family alive, a home standing, and a legacy secure. In her silence there was command. In her care there was power. And in her hands, the Viking world found its balance between war and peace, chaos and order, life and survival. A Viking woman could inherit land, divorce her husband, and reclaim her dowry. She could even stand in court and speak for herself before the law. In the time when most women in Europe were seen as property, Viking women were treated as people with rights and responsibilities. Their society was not perfect, but it gave them a voice that others could only dream of. In the North, a woman's worth was not measured by her beauty or her marriage. It was measured by her strength, her wisdom, and her ability to lead. If a marriage failed, she could walk away, take her dowry, and start again. No king, priest, or husband could chain her to a life she did not choose. In contrast, the queens of Christendom, women draped in gold and surrounded by servants, lived under invisible chains. Their marriages were political tools, their freedom traded for alliances. They could command armies on paper, but not their own lives. Every move they made was judged, every decision questioned by the men who ruled beside them. But in the North, far from the polished courts of Europe, a farmer's wife could hold more real power than a crowned queen. Her authority came not from birth or title, but from respect, earned through work, courage, and the will to survive. The Viking legal system, though brutal in many ways, recognized that strength could wear any face, even a woman's. She could sue in court, demand justice, and protect her family's honor through law, not violence. And when men spoke in councils or gathered at the Thing, women's voices echoed through their decisions, shaping the future in quiet, steady ways. In this world, freedom wasn't a gift. It was earned, defended, and lived every day. That is why, even now, the story of the Viking woman stands apart. She was no queen, but she lived like one, unbound, unbroken, and unafraid. Her hands wove more than cloth. They wove destiny. In the quiet rhythm of the loom, the Viking woman shaped not just garments, but the spirit of her people. The threads she pulled were more than wool. They were stories, prayers, and memories woven together. Each design carried meaning, spirals for protection, knots for strength, and symbols of the gods who watched over them. The sails she crafted caught the northern winds and carried ships across oceans, turning her craft into power. Her weaving was not only art, it was life, movement, and survival. Trade in the Viking world depended on these creations. Textiles, dyed in rich colors and woven with care, became treasures in distant markets. Her skill could bring silver, spices, and silk from faraway lands. Through her work, she connected the frozen north to the rest of the world. And yet, behind that skill was something deeper, a spiritual rhythm that tied her to the unseen. When the loom creaked and the threads tightened, she felt close to the gods, to the fates that spun the threads of every human life. Some women went even further. They became Völur, seeresses, who walked between worlds. The people feared them and respected them, believing they could speak with spirits and see what others could not. They held staffs carved with runes, wore cloaks of animal fur, and performed sacred rituals under the open sky. When great decisions had to be made, to go to war, to sail, to build, leaders sought their counsel. Their voices carried the weight of prophecy. In a world of warriors and kings, these women of vision and spirit stood apart. Their power was not forged in battle, but in silence, in faith, and in mystery. And through them, the Viking woman became not just a figure of strength, but a keeper of fate itself. Some legends speak of women who took up sword and shield, the Shield Maidens. Their names echo through sagas, half history and half myth, but their spirit was very real. While men ruled the battlefield, a few women chose to stand beside them, not behind. They fought not for glory, but for their homes, their families, and their freedom. The idea of a woman in armor shocked the world then, and still does now, But to the Vikings it was not impossible. In a land where survival demanded strength from everyone, courage knew no gender. When danger came, some women picked up axes and fought with the same fire that burned in their fathers and brothers. For centuries, scholars argued that these stories were fantasy, poetic inventions meant to inspire fear and wonder. But then, archaeology began to whisper a different truth. In graves once thought to belong to male warriors, scientists discovered the remains of women buried with weapons, horses, and armor. They were not servants or ornaments. They were soldiers. Their bones carried the marks of battle, and their graves spoke of respect. These discoveries did not rewrite history. They revealed what had been forgotten. Whether they led armies or defended villages, these warrior women broke the silence of the ages. They proved that the spirit of the Viking woman was not bound by the hearth alone. She could be the one who wove the sails, or the one who sailed under them into war. She could rule with the keys at her belt, or with a blade in her hand. In life and in legend, the shield maiden became the symbol of defiance, proof that strength could wear any face, and that even in the fiercest age, a woman's courage could shape the course of history. Their world is gone, but their echo remains. The halls they ruled have turned to dust. The ships they built have sunk beneath cold seas, but their spirit still speaks through history. In their freedom, their strength and their will, Viking women carved a place that time tried to erase. They were never queens with crowns of gold, yet they ruled something far greater, their own lives. They shaped families, guided leaders, and built the very backbone of the Viking age. Every field plowed, every sail raised, and every home that survived a brutal winter carried their mark. Their story reminds us that true power doesn't always sit on a throne. It lives in those who endure, who build, who keep hope alive when the world turns cold. Viking women did not need royal titles to command respect. Their strength was quiet but unbreakable, their influence invisible but everlasting. In a time when most women were silenced by law and custom, they spoke through action, through courage, through wisdom, through survival. Even now, as historians uncover their graves and study their lives, the truth grows clearer. The Viking woman was not just a figure of the past. She was a force that changed it. Her legacy endures in every story of resilience, every act of defiance, and every voice that refuses to be forgotten. The queens of the north are gone, but the women who ruled without crowns still live on, in legend, in memory, and in every woman who dares to live free. If you value stories that reveal the truth behind the myths, subscribe. Every week, we uncover voices that history tried to silence, the forgotten, the fierce, and the free. Your support helps us bring their strength back to light, one story at a time. These women weren't just part of the Viking age. They built it, shaped it, and lived it with a courage that still inspires the world today. So tell us in the comments, which part of Viking life surprised you most? Was it their freedom, their power, or the truth that they needed no crown to rule their own destiny?